Come, let us explore the 15th passage of the Great Garuda in Flight, a Dzogchen classic. This passage is drawn from Vairocana's 5 early translations of Gaurav Dorje's Dzogchen Sunday, also known as FREEBIES, translated into Tibetan by Vairocana Rakshita, translated into English by Mihai Darbach, adapted by Dzogchen Sunday Lama Jigme Gyatso. So this was composed many centuries ago in a far-off land that then was known as Haryana, but today is known as the Swat Valley of Pakistan. Together, let us relaxingly recite. Those who desire bliss turn their backs on bliss. As bliss is already present, they seek out bliss by bliss. Mistaken about perfect purity, they aim for an outer object. However, these grasping perceivers never experience enlightenment. So I'm going to do my best to transform that which might sound like pseudo-spiritual word salad into something that makes sense. And so to do that, I'm going to assume that if you're coming, that a certain number of the people who are joining me this morning are new to this. And that's actually ideal, because that way you have less preconceptions. I'm going to turn to a visual aid. There are many confusions surrounding mindfulness and meditation, and I found the most effective way to dispel them is to consider them through the metaphoric lens of neuroscience. So I'm going to fiddle with the computer for a moment. Sturgeon's law reminds us that 90% of everything sucks. Everything, every phenomena, every being, including meditation teachers, 90%, that's pretty grim. What could that suckiness look like? Well, it looks like Yang's religious patriarchy. And I know I was raised to be this way. Those in the thrall of Yang's religious patriarchy not only are rigid, fearful, superstitious, controlling, elitist, cryptic, competitive, and cruel, but they look down their nose at those who aren't. And so these are the people who implore their students to not only actively focus and actively analyze, but do it so excessively that they exhaust their prefrontal cortex, thus presenting with symptoms of depression, no less triggering their amygdala, the seat of both anxiety and aggression, which are the exact opposites of peace and love. Fortunately, evolution has provided us with a poignant antidote. And by the way, not only are these two regions, the medial and dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, classically overstimulated by the minions of that's the phrase I used, religious patriarchy. But society has conditioned us to be this way. Who has made it to adulthood without hearing the lie? Well, if it's to be, it's up to me. The way our society is structured, especially in late-stage capitalism, especially in countries enduring a rise in fascism, is that we are perpetually exhausting mechanisms which evolved to be used sporadically, not constantly, with dire consequences. And once again, the solution is simple. And the solution is twofold. What if mindfulness was nothing more than a fancy way of saying noticing? See, every time we inhale, we are wired to automatically access the sympathetic facet of our autonomic nervous system ensconced within the middle third of our spinal cord. This bad boy has evolved to help us to vulnerably, passively, viscerally, randomly, and fleetingly notice, mind's antics of perception, emotion, intention, cognition, recollection, and imagination. Because this mechanism has evolved, it helps to do so vulnerably, passively, and randomly. No longer are we a slave to our preferences, picking and choosing what to notice, and instead, as minions of non-duality, we can notice all manner of phenomena, from the external to the internal, from the physical to the mental, from the pleasurable to the painful, from the interesting to the boring, from the glorious to the grotesque. And I should have said acolytes of non-duality. Please accept my apology. But what do we do with that which we notice? What if meditation was simply a fancy word to describe a very special type of relaxation? You see, every time we exhale, we are already wired to automatically access the parasympathetic aspect of our autonomic nervous system, divided between the lower third and the upper third of that same spinal cord. Our parasympathetic nervous system has evolved to support the physical relaxation that supports the mental release of that which we noticed during our previous inhalation to such a degree that they could literally, fleetingly feel less stressful, less permanent, and less defining, and figuratively feel as non-graspable, so vast and devoid, like the illusion, the infinite azure sky, the bright and beautiful cloudless morn, which although could look tantalizing to the eye, feels non-graspable to the hand. What if enlightenment was as simple as getting so good at the Buddha's Eightfold Path that we practice it spontaneously, habitually, easily, and effectively? And what if, by merely practicing the seventh fold of mindfulness and the eightfold of meditation, maybe for as little as 5 minutes once every 12 hours or so, the remaining 6 folds of the Buddha's path pertaining to noticing change, experiencing kindness, and going with the flow. What if these remaining details took care of themselves as an effortless side effect of authentically practicing, noticing, and releasing? And so it could be argued that, well, I'm going to come back to that. Let's go back to the root text, the lesson text. Those who desire bliss turn their backs on bliss. As bliss is already present, they seek out bliss by bliss. This, of course, reminds me of the Blistonia episode of The Cinema. So what the author, Prahe Vaja, known in Tibet as Gaurab Dorje, is trying to drive home is this. We have a choice whenever we sit down to practice mindfulness and meditation. The choice is simple. Do we actively compete against our autonomic nervous system through over-focus and over-analysis, thus triggering our amygdala, the seat of both anxiety and aggression? Or do we passively cooperate with that same autonomic nervous system by silently and mentally reciting the demonstrative pronoun this each time we feel air enter our nostrum? And by silently and mentally reciting the one-syllable verb ease, again, each time we feel air exit our nostril. For doing so calms our amygdala and gently stimulates the anterior cingulate gyrus, which functions as the hub of our mirror neurons, the seat of empathy, which is the root of both compassion and love. Compassion is the kindness triggered by aversion. I hate that. Other people probably hate that too. Love is the kindness triggered by desire. I want that. Other people probably want that too. So when people are taught, as I was taught, as maybe you were taught, that the path to bliss is paved with over-focus and over-analysis, and they traverse the path, which ironically takes them away from bliss, it's exhausting and it's discouraging. Some people learn. Some people take action, notice the results, and say, oh, this is taking me away from where I want to go. Let me try different actions. Some people never learn that, and they persist, and they just change their worldview, and they say things like, well, this is going to take a long time. This is going to take 7 days. This is going to take 7 decades or 7 lifetimes or 3 times the lifespan of the universe. I kid you not. Many people believe that. But the Buddha taught, hey, this can be done in as little as a week. Now, it does mean we feel only bliss. We experience the full spectrum of perceptions, full spectrum of sight, sound, sensations, flavors, scents, the full spectrum of that which we can notice, emotions, intentions, thoughts, memories, and imaginings. But it is as if we are surfing a rather delightful carrier wave that is unleashed simply by passively cooperating with the same autonomic nervous system that the ancients referred to as our Buddha nature. Let's now return to this morning's lesson text. Mistaken about perfect purity, they aim for an outer object. However, these grasping perceivers never experience enlightenment. So, the history of Buddhism and the history of most spiritual, most philosophical practices, most contemplative traditions follow the same outline. First there was proto-Buddhism, then there was institutional Buddhism. And to illustrate that, I would like to go back to what's that word to describe an image that illustrates something? Anyway, so I'm going to tap button 9. In Buddhist mythology, we talk about the Buddha, who was known for being flexible, loving, rational, laid-back, egalitarian, lucid, cooperative, and kind. We talk about his foolish, and that's being charitable, his foolish cousin Devadatta, who he rejoiced in being rigid, fearful, superstitious, controlling, elitist, cryptic, competitive, and cruel. For instance, Devadatta not only tried to prevent the Buddha's enlightenment, but after his enlightenment, he wound up stealing approximately half of his patrons and half of his students by saying the Buddha was, too soft and too easy, that he was forsaking asceticism. And then the dark irony is once Devadatta had done all that, and his new patrons and students recognized how ineffective his teachings were, they returned to the Buddha. Well, the people follow in the footsteps of Devadatta not because they're evil, not because they're malicious, but because they've been conditioned to be that way, and they have yet to wake up from their conditioning. And even though they're destructive, and even though they're dangerous, they should be pitied. Not necessarily followed, but definitely pitied. When I was working with teachers who were definitely following in the footsteps of Devadatta, and they didn't even know it, they taught frequently of a path of purity and that there's a long process to become enlightened. They taught gradual enlightenment, but the Buddha taught sudden enlightenment. Enlightenment is as quickly accomplished in as quickly as 7 days. That's pretty quick. This is what's referred to. And now I'm going to turn back to the text. That is what's referred to when we read, mistaken about perfect purity, they aim for an outer object. These are the people who try to control what they perceive. They try to control what they emote, intend, reason, recall, and imagine. And all they wind up doing is repressing their mindfulness and becoming horribly, horribly inauthentic. Lying not only to everybody else, but also lying to themselves. It takes courage to be vulnerable and authentic. It takes wisdom to balance authenticity with kindness. And so the author used the ironic phrase, grasping perceivers, because these guys are not perceiving, they are squelching their mindfulness, but they're doing it because they are idealistically grasping unrealistic intentions, ignoring the Buddha's practice of vulnerability, authenticity, and kindness. And thus they never experience the enlightenment that is simply the effortless byproduct of vulnerably and passively noticing and relaxing. They fail to realize that, yes, our anger and our desires can cause harm to others. But the most effective way to escape their tyranny is not through repression, but by noticing and relaxing. For instance, there's been times when I've watched media and it's triggered some anger from my past. By vulnerably noticing that anger and then relaxing as best I could during each exhalation, it made losing my temper an impossibility. There have been times when I was in a relationship with one person, another person literally threw themselves at me and became sexual assault because when I said, please stop, please don't, and they persisted, and yet in their efforts to seduce me against my will, I was able to not give in to them, not betray my partner, simply because I was vulnerable as I breathed in and relaxed as I breathed out. So whether we're experiencing tumultuous aversion or tumultuous avarice, vulnerability and relaxation protect us from harming ourselves, from harming others. This is the fruit of mindfulness and meditation. The same mindfulness and meditation that cause us to master the remainder of the Buddha's Eightfold Path. Having completed our opening lesson, it's time for us to now shift gears. It is Qui-Gon Jinn Tuesday morning. Come, let us meditate like a Jedi after approximately 30 seconds of housekeeping. This is the Dzogchen Sende Lama Jigme Gyatso of the Buddha Joy Meditations. For more than 30 years, I have harnessed my autistic special interests as well as my ADHD hyperfocus to spend about 8 hours a day, almost every day, studying, practicing, mastering, and reverse engineering the teachings and techniques of each school of meditation so that I could become your personal, nerdy, neurodivergent guide to nirvana. Welcome, my friends, to Meditate Like a Jedi, which is made possible due to the generosity of viewers just like you. For the remainder of this morning's live stream, let's play with the latest iteration of very easy meditation practice text, or Satana, if you're nasty. So, allow me to remind you that the purpose of the outer Lama is to introduce us to the inner Lama of our effortless awareness and release. We can let us guide our intention through the cunning use of words. Lama, come to this crowd. And now, in harmony with our breathing, let us silently and mentally recite this and ease. And although we could do this lying down or while walking around the block, let us do this now while sitting as sustainably as we can. The moment you have a specific question about Buddhist philosophy or meditation, do not hesitate to type your question in great detail in the chat window. Or I tend to check for questions once every 15 or 20 minutes or so. Again, let us use words to invoke the metaphoric Lama, which is simply the team, the inner Lama, which is the team of simply noticing and relaxing in harmony with our inhalation and our exhalation together. Lama, blend with this mind. Each time we feel our lungs swell, let us silently and mentally recite the demonstrative pronoun this. Every time we feel our lungs, our chest sink, let us silently and mentally recite the one-syllable verb ease. You have taken your first step into a much larger world. If you feel that I have earned it, you could give this live stream a thumbs up. You could even help support this channel. In approximately 11 hours, I would very much like to return to lead today's evening meditation class as well as group practice. And if you are as geeky as me, may the Force be with you always.